In section 4, we're going to talk about the source of intelligence. We already mentioned some elements of that. We know that whatever we know already about the source of intelligence and IQ, it's just coming from twins study. I don't want to actually talk a lot about twins study because like we talked about them a lot previously. You can just go back and try to remember what was the difference between identical twins and fraternal twins. That's a good question, right? So basically, identical twins, they are same. Their genes are same because it was just one egg, one sperm, but apparently, based on some conditions, they began to be like two children at a time. However, when it comes to fraternal twins, they are basically two separate eggs, two separate sperm. They just happen to be together during the prenatal development. So identical twins, they do have same genes, but fraternal twins, they don't have, if that makes sense. So what is the point here? There are just some studies actually comparing identical twins who, like one of them will just actually grow up with their parents, another would just grow up with just adopted parents. And that kind of a study is actually showing that identical twins would show the same IQ scores no matter of the environment, which means like the main source of intelligence might be genes. So genes is just so important. So actually, what is the answer for nature or nurture based on these arguments of twins? It seems like nature is just more important when it comes to IQ tests. What about nurture? How we can just address that? How we can just address the environment? It seems like if you would have a good biology, if you would have a good gene, a good environment can actually result to just a higher IQ test as well. For example, you might be genius biologically, but if you wouldn't have a good environment, you cannot like ever actually express that sort of giftedness anywhere, right? Because you didn't have the environment to actually, express yourself. There are going to be some cases, there are going to be some people who, for example, they don't have that sort of innate resources, they don't have a good gene for IQ, yet because of the environment, they can actually express themselves in the best way possible. They had good school, they had just good connection from their parents, they had just good financial resources, so now they are successful. And that's the difference. So here the point is a good combination of both, like nature and nurture, can just help people to actually express themselves and be intelligent. Again, we have to mention the idea of reaction range. You remember that, right? I was just saying that everyone is unique and we might have some genes, but based on the environment, everyone responds differently to the environment. You can just go back to the previous chapters, read the concepts because they are important, and just try to understand the whole idea better. What else? So again, whatever we know now, it's just coming from adoption studies and twin studies. One important point, which is just really interesting and we don't know the answer, it seems like adopted children, they tend to have higher IQ compared to not adopted children. Like their IQ always just falling between 105 to 110. What else? Here is actually talking about racial and ethnic groups and the impact of that on IQ scores. It seems like there are going to be some cultural biases in a test. There might be some differences in communication styles and the way you're going to measure a person from a different culture. We all know that there always going to be a stereotype. For example, in testing Asian children, like everyone, like every experimenter, they feel like Asian children, they are genius in solving any sort of mathematical problem. Yet it might not be the case. Maybe they would be really gifted in arts. Maybe they would be really good in musical instruments. So we should actually set that sort of biases aside whenever we're gonna enter to the experimental situation and whenever we're gonna test children, because they can actually understand like our biases, they can just actually get what is our mindset, and this actually might change their behavior. Another point is a stereotype threat, which is so important because you might get anxious about a low performance based on your race and based on the biases out there. For example, there are going to be some minorities because of um, the main environment actually think that they are not good enough. So whenever they are just being tested, they do have that kind of anxiety that, okay, everybody actually feels like I'm not really good at solving, for example, this sort of mathematical problem, so I might be that bad. So, they do have that sort of mindset that can impact their performance. So we have to, if we are an experimenter, we have to just get rid of any sort of biases whenever we are conducting experiment, especially with minorities and BIPOC students. Oh, here is a video that can be really helpful. Watch that. It actually shows you how stereotypes might impact children. There are going to be some factors, like different elements that can impact IQ tests. For example, socioeconomic status of family, of course, it is so important. If, for example, a child wouldn't see any sort of testing materials from the beginning, if the child wouldn't go to a good school that they would provide them some similar resources as those tests, they wouldn't have that much familiarity in the experimental situation, so they might just mess up with the test. The result might be really poor. So basically, they would be, the teacher or policymaker, they would just put them into a special education services, in which that might not be the case, right? Because I remember that last semesters I had two Hispanic students. We were talking and they were just saying that, we were talking about our experiences. They were saying that in their previous school, basically, their teacher actually pulled them out from the class because they were bilinguals, and they got tested twice because of just being from Hispanic family. Like, the teacher had a stereotype that those children are not capable in speaking English. So they wanted to put them in special education services, yet they were fluent in just both languages. They were just from Hispanic families and household. So this actually shows that how environment can impact children's intellectual abilities and how much it is important. Another point might be different values among cultures. For example, in general, again, there's a stereotype about Asian cultures that they are so good in STEM majors and mathematical problems. Yet, because their culture actually value that a lot, but it's not be the case for every family here, especially those Asian American children who grew up here with just different cultural values. So we have to just consider the value of culture here, because like in some countries still, they would just push students to just do more engineering majors, science majors, but this is not the case in every possible country. We have to just understand cultural differences as well. Again, there are going to be some home assessment, which is important, check the book, but just basically saying that parent-child interaction is just so important, and the way parents going to interact with their child, it might impact children's cognitive ability as well.